Welcome to Navarero's online video. Today we are back to take another look at the list. This is the list of things that I believe the game should be doing before going out of early access. A few essential items of changes and additions that would make the game feel much more coherent and actual like a fully fledged full release instead of the cobbled together barely functional early access experience that it has been for quite some while now. I don't think all the items here are realistic to be achieved, especially with how spotty the development has been for quite a while. And yeah, I think that's overall a shame, but I think all of these are kind of essentials that the game should be hitting ideally. There are about 30 items on here. I'll try to make it quick, but I also want to explain some of these to give you guys an idea on what I mean specifically. So let's get started. I made sure to put everything together in a way that should make some sense. So we will be starting with the stuff regarding trains and train simulation. First up, they should absolutely fix random derailing over switches, truss bridges, and crossings. It's highly annoying, happens at any speed, and whatever the track may look like before and after, it's just seemingly happening at random, and it's a huge bummer for the gameplay. Also, they should be fixing the brakes. They have changed something recently, but it's not necessarily a good change. The brakes now seem all way too weak, but yeah, either before the update or after, none of the versions are really good with the brakes because beforehand, you would barely have any braking effect up until about 85%. And if you pull the brakes any further than that, they would suddenly stop the train like it just went straight into a brick wall or something. Or like a cliff face, something that's really gonna stop the thing dead. And yeah, ideally things should be more linear and also decently powerful so it still works. Right now it really doesn't. Another thing that doesn't work anymore is wheel slip. Used to be in the game, got removed maybe like 1.5 years ago or something around that. We also needed sand back in the day if the wheels started slipping to get a bit more grip, but none of that's in the game anymore and should definitely be re-added. Also, next point, reworked local collisions for players, functioning step ladders to get into the engines a bit better, and maybe close the gaps between cars. So anything to do with moving on the train, getting onto the train, and moving in between the cars and all of that. So if we quickly go over to the engines, I can show you guys some examples, but overall, yeah, the thing is, it's first up very inconsistent between engines because with some of them, you can just basically walk through the bunker and all of that. With most of them, that doesn't really work. And yeah, sometimes you can also walk through the main boiler and all of that. I know there needs to be some things where this is possible, like the cabin walls and roof, because otherwise you could get stuck in the engines and that wouldn't be any good either. But the way it works right now, definitely at least a few engines should see a rework because this is just jarringly unfinished with how it works right now. Okay, next one. Proper Steam cutoff sim, also an option to play without. Right now, the cutoff sim that we had since the end of last year, it's been something that they tried adding about a year prior to that. It got completely rejected by the community and now they just put it in and we have to deal with it. It's completely unrealistic because really the Steam cutoff shouldn't be giving you any higher top speed. And instead, if you go at top speed too long with the full reverser, then you should be losing your Steam your Steam pressure. And that's a completely different way and would require a bit more simulation, and the game apparently isn't getting that. And the current version is, at the end, just a top speed nerf, highly unrealistic, highly annoying to deal with, and at the very least, there should be an option to turn it off completely and have the old version again. Because right now, it's neither realistic nor really helping the gameplay in any meaningful way. At least in my opinion. Physics need to be more consistent. We've been through that whole point on one of my later showcase videos, where I have multiple climaxes on a save, and I specifically set up a train to do one specific incline, and it turned out that sometimes I load into the save, I fire up all the engines, and I save again. Maybe on that day the train makes it up, maybe the next time I load it in it doesn't make it up, and it's just highly inconsistent. Everything is the same except for the day I play on, and that should not be the case. So yeah, that needs to be addressed. It might be something that got changed recently. They've done some things, it seems, especially with performance overall. These are just some things that would be very hard to test, and until I don't have, as long as I don't have any confirmation that this has been addressed, it's gonna be on the list. Next up, remove random link breaking on the new gondolas. So that's the high capacity gondolas, the ones that all got derailed with the latest update due to the change in the links. That link change may have also addressed the point that I'm making right now, because it used to be the case that sometimes the link between them would just randomly break. Nothing would derail, but the back part of your train would maybe be going a different direction on an incline, or just disappearing from the rest of the train altogether, and just be standing on the track at some point. And that definitely needs to be addressed. Again, it might have very well changed, but I would need to do more testing here. And again, until there's confirmation, it's gonna be on the list. Also, the small cars, the Greg, Sugarcane, Flat, whatever, they should all be more stable. It's way too easy to pull them apart, pull them off the track, and sometimes they just seem to be flying off the track at random. It's annoying, makes them almost unusable, and it just sucks. They also need to take care of the twitching between running trains, especially in multiplayer, but even in single player. If you run a long train, your car will sometimes jump a bit back and forth. It's just gonna do like little micro movements, and yeah, that can make it really difficult to get from your tender into the engine and do anything. It makes it really hard to hit the right lever if you maybe want to pull the brake or something, and it just needs to be taken care of. The game needs to also consistently, correctly identify what the player is looking at. This mainly means if you want to hook two cars together, getting the proper highlight on the couplers doesn't always happen consistently. I've recently spent like 5 minutes trying to couple up an engine and the first car of the train, and I just couldn't get it right. It would always give me the coupler on the tender instead of one where I actually needed to put the link in. But it's also, and I think we should go to the Glenbrook here, that's an obvious example. It should be much more consistent when it comes to what you are looking at here if you want to pull something. For example, let's pull the reverser forward. And sometimes if I want to look at the reverser and pull it, I'm instead, for some reason, having the brake highlighted and all of that. It's really inconsistent, and this could be an amazing feature. Just doing everything in first person feels nice, pulling all the stuff back and forth. Also, in some ways, the direction needs to be different. This is me pulling the regulator from left to right. But yeah, even just the highlights at all, it doesn't always work, and that needs to be consistent in order to function in the game. Next one, and these are points that I added for the new update. Properly put physics to sleep. It was the case for the longest time that this wouldn't happen at all. And what it means is that if you have maybe like these engines or any car standing around on the track completely doing nothing, the game should deactivate physics for them so that you just don't have the calculations for them happening. They behave like a static object until you touch them again, at which point they would be having the physics calculations reactivated. But this needs to be happening in order to make the worlds run a bit smoother. Before this update, it was so inconsistent and wouldn't really happen often enough that they would deactivate it, making the worlds far more laggy, because far more calculations would be happening than there really should be happening. And now the opposite is true. Sometimes you run an engine into a car and your engine derails because that car still behaves like a brick, doesn't move at all, and yeah, it's another huge point which is right now making the game almost unplayable. Another thing, and that could have maybe been also put on the industries, some item loading doesn't really work right now. It might be mostly confined to just the bulkhead cars here, because I've seen this on this car right here, but I've also tried it on the logging cars, and on the logging cars it's actually okay, but on these ones, if we take a look here, it's actually doing stuff weirdly. These ones should just be loading as per usual, as we've seen there. But for these ones, it's sometimes, for some reason the crane has just been empty. And it swung back much faster than it should have. But most of the time, the whole load is just gonna bounce off and go airborne. So something weird is going on there. Again, other cars seem to be fine, but this definitely needs to be addressed. And I hope they do that before putting this onto the main branch, because this should not be in the game. Again, sometimes it's fine, but sometimes it just yeets the cargo. Next one, and I might as well keep an eye on this. We now move over to the content side of things, while stuff is going on in the background. First up, passenger transport. The passenger car has been in the game since the last anniversary update, so happy anniversary for the passenger coach to be in this game while being absolutely completely useless. You cannot load anything on here. You can pull them around your world if you want to feel like you are doing something, but there will never be any passenger in here because passenger transport still hasn't been added. And yeah, they promised it, so I'm putting this on here just because it should be in this game. More switches, crossover, etc., especially to work for double tracking. Really what I want here is a few more intersection or a few more switch options, but also especially crossings that work with the angles of our switches. For example, one new switch that I would like to see is something like this, what I have mocked up over here, by just overlapping two regular switches. So the X type of switch, where you can choose between either going across or just sticking to the side you are on. For other switches or for other crossings, this would be really useful for double tracking. Just having a crossover that works if you have two parallel tracks and then go across with them using switches, just like this. And this is actually the same angle from what the track here has when it goes off the switch. So this is basically double the angle between the offside and the thing that goes straight. And this is just the angle. Would be really useful for a lot of different crossovers, and getting these would mean having tools that work with each other. And this is really what we need in this game. Also, another one that I would like to see is like this triple fork, but without the middle one. Just a Y switch going off to either side. But yeah, we have been dealing with the same few switches for a long time. This has been the only real addition here, apart from the 45-degree crossover. But yeah, a few more basic things would be highly appreciated at this point. So that's why I think they are kind of essential. I also put lamp props to light up the yards in brackets, and I think it deserves a point on this list, because at night it's so difficult getting anything done with how dark it can get, especially when there's any weather effect happening. And it shouldn't be too difficult getting a few lamps that turn on at night and turn off at day. We already have that technology in some of the coaches over here, so putting that into static props would be a real help at night and shouldn't be too tough on the devs to add. So yeah, that's why that's on the list as well. Next one, and I'm glad I can finally take this off, text chat. I am not going to celebrate this, because honestly the game is a cooperative multiplayer first and foremost. Online is in its title, and it should not have taken 3 years for them to add a text chat. It should have either been there with the first public version, or maybe a few months after, but 3 years later is hilariously late, hilariously bad, and they deserve to be memed on for that. Okay, next feature. A way to change details about the engines and cars after purchase. I mean basically any customization that we can do over here. Let's go with a Monty, for example. Once we buy the engines, we cannot change the number anymore. We cannot change the name. We cannot change anything that's on the tender. Especially annoying because with the later maps we actually get stuff on the tender by default, which is annoying, and we should be able to put our own name on there if we want to. Smokestack should be changeable after the fact, same with headlights or paint. Any option that any engine or car has, we should be able to do something about it after purchase. And potentially also maintenance work if that ever was to happen. So there should be another workshop where all of this stuff can be done. And ideally it would be something where we can roll in on one side and roll off the other in case we want to change like 20 or 30 cars at a time. Doesn't necessarily need to be that long, but at least drive-through would be appreciated in order to make that stuff work a bit easier, instead of having to roll back in reverse and go in and out all the time like that. But yeah, haven't seen anything about that, and the devs said it would be a very difficult thing. I kinda call bullshit on that, but who knows. Also selling engines and rolling stock, because that's just... we can delete stuff. And we don't get any money back for it, we delete it out of existence wherever we want. And I think we should bring stuff to a specific area and then get a fraction of our money back. Maybe 50%, maybe 25%. Maybe if we ever had anything like a maintenance necessity, that might play into it, who knows, but yeah, we don't have anything like that. Just deletion, and it feels kinda awful. Next one. New cars and engines should have a specific area in which they spawn, and this should be movable by the player. So what I want to see is the return of the buy track, which we have right here. But actually something that we can select over here with a limit of being able to put one down somewhere in the world, and that would be all. And it really only needs to be like two of these platforms in parallel with a bit of space in between. Maybe just like this without the part in the back, maybe a bit longer, who knows, and any track that we put in between them would then be eligible for cast and spawn on. I don't really like how there was always just this one set thing that we cannot move about, that we will always have to return to the center of the map in order to get any more cars from. I like it far less that we can now also just get stuff from anywhere. I think it would be best if the player could choose the position, would also allow us to go for different scenarios across the map if we want to start in a different area. And yeah, that should be how that's being dealt with. That's it for the features. Again, no additions and all of that. It's a pretty short list, but there are plenty of things that should be done about changing the existing things. And the next point, if you know my videos, you know this is coming, and it's a big one for me. Fix industries so they don't overfill outputs, and again double output for one good if the other is full. What I mean by this is, let's take a look at the iron mine as a popular example. We have some goods on the input side, we have some supplies here, but also the output is full, and usually for one batch of input, I mean that's like 2 lumber and 1 beam, we should be getting 5 units of iron ore. But what happens right now, since the output is full, if I only remove one item from here, we go down to 289, and in a moment it's going to put us back to 290. What happened there is the industry just got through one of the batches of input supplies, and it produced 5 items for the output, but it was only able to store 1 of them, so 4 of them are now being lost, and we only got a single item out of this. Of course, this is highly wasteful, and the industries should always be checking if they have enough capacity in the output before they produce anything. Also, and this is the slightly more complicated one, if you have full outputs, or one side is full and the other one isn't with multiple goods, and there is enough input to get more stuff produced. How it used to work like 1.5 years ago or something, I don't know when this change occurred. If one side was empty and the other was full, you would double up the output on this side. Usually you would get 1 beam, 1 lumber, but if lumber is full and there's still space for more beams, you now get 2 beams, so that in the end you still get the same amount of output per supply item. Doesn't happen anymore. If one side is full, the other one is still only going to get 1 at a time, meaning that basically half of your resources here are not being used at all. Really inefficient. They tried fixing it, they made it much worse, and then they reverted back to this broken version. So yeah, should go back to the good version. That's all I'm asking for here. That's really nothing new, it's just get back to the one that worked the best. Balance the fuel economy both for consumption rates as well as making sure the facilities make sense. Like needing to fill up the wood rig with firewood, maybe with a firewood transportation car, that kind of thing. So this has really 2 sides. First up, consumption rates. We have some engines in this game, like the Twin-Sea, that have 6 times the amount of coal in the tender as some other engines like the Ruby Basin and Cliff House. Problem is, consumption rates and all of that are a constant right now, meaning that This engine can last 6 times as long as these two, meaning that on high fuel consumption rates, these two are absolutely useless because you cannot really do much with them before needing to refuel, and refueling that often is really not a good idea, so yeah, can't really use them all that much. While at the same time, with 6 times the capacity, these tender engines are still going to run so long that refueling isn't really a thing that you ever need to think about. So my suggestion here is to first up rebalance them so that these engines move a bit closer together. More fuel consumptions for the larger engines and maybe also higher capacity in the boiler so that you need to shovel a bit more every time you fuel up the engine and things go empty a bit quicker. But still, of course, the larger tender should always mean that these can run longer than these. But it should maybe be a factor of like 2 or 3 and not 6. And then also get all the consumption rates fixed in a good way to begin with. Because right now it doesn't really work for anything in my opinion. The other side on this is more to do with the fuel economy, mainly on the firewood end. Because for firewood, we have the firewood facility, formerly known as Firewood Depot, and the wood rig. The thing is, the firewood facility needs far more space. You need access to both sides. This one for the supply, this one to get your firewood out of. It's much harder to place and you actually need to actively supply it in order to get anything from it. On the other hand, we have the wood rig, which will just fill up on its own. Takes a while, but you leave it standing there for a few minutes and it's good to go. And you don't really need to take care of anything. And I think that's it's bad. Would make much more sense if you can place a wood rig somewhere as a little depot, but you would either have to pay in order to get firewood replaced, or actually bring your own firewood and put it in here in order for it to have something when you need it. I get that you cannot necessarily put a firewood facility at every single point, and maybe you would only want it at some key facilities. But yeah, the wood rig, if you use both of them, this thing is making this thing completely unnecessary. You don't need to deal with any of it, just put down multiple wood rigs and you're kinda done with it. And that's just really bad game design, if you even can call it that. Okay, so much about this. Next up, undo the payout changes. Then buff raw iron and all wheat chain products except for cows. The thing is, there have been some silent changes to the payouts a while ago, and they are usually for the worse. Things that used to be balanced, like getting a full staker of beams and getting a full staker of lumber would give you the same stuff. Used to be 72 dollars per car before. Now it's $20 per item, 120 per car on the lumber side. And for the beams it's still the same per item, but only 60 per car because you can only load half of that. Meaning that for a lot of deliveries you want to go with lumber, and that's kinda weird. I liked it much more before when it was the same across the board. And not less for this one and more for the other. It's even worse when you look at something like the outputs from your iron smelter. Rails used to already be very profitable. $250 per full-size day car before, so 10 items on there. It got a buff. It's now up to 35 per item, 350 per car. I don't know if the extra money was necessary there, but the worst thing here is raw iron, because that already was sitting at $75 per car before. Again, compared to $250, you can see that this was never a well-paying item. And it's now even worse because it went down to $10 per item and $30 per car. Completely unusable, half the amount per car as you get for the logs, which is the first item in the industry chain that you can deliver. What the hell? So yeah, that should definitely be reversed, and then also buff raw iron, keep everything else the same. It used to work before, and the changes really only make it worse. For the wheat farm stuff, it could be a nice alternative starting point for your industries. Just go to the wheat farm, the freight depot, and the water wells in order to get started. But all those items are paying absolutely abysmally. You barely get any experience from that in order to actually level up and eventually be able to transport the cows, which is really the only item that is worth a damn. So that should all be at least doubled, and I think that might still be not enough. But yeah, payouts are whack. I could make a whole nother video to go more in-depth about it. Speaking about in-depth, the economy as a whole. Right now, the only things we pay for are the cars and the engine. We can put down as much tech as we want for free. We can put down as many of our facilities as we want for free. Building entire roundhouses doesn't cost us anything. And I don't think that should be the case. Things should cost money. The payments should be adjusted to account for that. We should have some amount of stuff from the get-go, maybe with the option to take out a loan and buy more rails to begin with. But that should also come, of course, with a whole planning tool so that we can wait with putting down actual tech until we are absolutely sure that we want to. But right now, none of that is in the game, and it's making everything a really shallow experience. Part of getting fuel or just a general economy in here would also mean that maybe we would pay for any item that we want to transport, or at least if we lose it along the way, we would need to pay for it. Also, if instead of bringing the logs to the sawmill, we bring them over to the firewood depot for our own usage, we should also pay for that, instead of getting rewarded. But right now, none of the economy makes sense. There's potential for having two modes, one of which with the economy as I just described, one of which without that being more like what we have right now, but this shouldn't be the only type of experience we get from this game. And not having any of that, it's kinda weird and very, very shallow. Next one, combined unloading platforms should not delete supplies that end up on the wrong part of the platform. For that, we go over to the oil field over here, where we have steel pipes and beams on pretty much the same platform. There's a little gap in the middle, and if any of your goods make it across the gap by even a tiny bit, like maybe a centimeter of your pipe goes onto the other side, or a tiny bit of your beams makes it onto this one, there is a good chance that the entire item will not be delivered, but instead deleted. You get no money for it, it's not added to the storage, and it's absolutely bullshit and should be adjusted to make work. The only change required here would be to, if this platform detects any item that shouldn't be on here, right now it seems to delete it, and it should just not do it. Items despawn after about a second or two on their own, and that is good enough, and not deleting the item immediately would mean that this platform would actually have enough time to actually see if something arrived. Could then also theoretically extend the hitboxes so that you can actually put the beams on here if you want to, because in the end it's the same platform, who cares. Okay, so much about that. Let's go to the menus. Starting with change the gameplay menu so that we can combine custom day-night length with dynamic weather again. Long story short, it has been addressed. I'm happy to take it off the list, and thankfully that's one point less to worry about because it finally works again. It used to work when they put in the whole weather system, and then I think with the November or December update last year, so a few months later, it got changed in a way that made everything dysfunctional. I hope it won't be the same this time around because otherwise I enjoy it as long as it lasts. Back then they didn't really seem to get the message of what was even wrong with it, so I'm glad they changed it again, but I hope they don't mess with it anymore. Next up, better menus should get rid of all the drop-down lists and make it easier to buy multiple of the same cars or engines. And with this one, I can get rid of it until this point. It's really just 2 points in here, and yeah, they definitely removed the drop-down menus. We now have proper menus on the side here with previews, making it easier to actually get whatever items, buildings, or whatever else we wanted. So we can now actually get exactly what we want to instead of the whole guesswork. So that's all looking much more finished, and I'm happy to take off the items where this applies. The thing is, for me, with purchasing stuff, I mean, we can only purchase one at a time, and it doesn't really work all that well if you want to go back in and get multiple ones. Because if I buy this one here, and I may have just pressed the wrong button, I want to actually customize it. If I go back in, we are back at the hand car. Need to scroll back to whatever I was choosing before. And if I chose to have a different paint job in here, different name, different number, we would have to get back in here and put this in again. Really what should be happening, if we buy something, have the customization, and later go back into the menu, we should be right back here again. So if I maybe go with number 1, 2, 3, I buy this one and I come back here, I can just go and remove the 3, add the 4, that's my next car, and so on and so forth. But having to start back from scratch, it's kind of annoying. So that part still stands, but I'm glad to at least take half the point off there. Track laying, quality of life, buttons to invert the radius or turn it straight in circle mode. They did something like this for non-circle mode, but honestly non-circle mode is a travesty to use, and control makes it straight, so that's nice, but it also always, or very often, does some weird stuff, especially if you are on uneven ground, like this right now. So I don't really want to use it. But yeah, for circle mode, which is the superior one to use, we should have a tool that allows us to go straight from, in this case, minus 40 meter radius to plus 40, so just turning the corner the other direction, and then also having a button that lets us put it down as a straight for the moment. And if we let go of a button or press it again, whatever, we should go back to whatever corner there was. I mean, they could as well make it so that if we have the button minus 40 meters by default, we press it once, go to plus 40 meters, press it again, go straight, and then back to minus. Something like that. But yeah, this is something that people have been asking for years and we don't get it. Also, the game needs to remember the grades. Doesn't always happen. Especially if I place down some track, maybe go up a grade to, let's go full 10%. I go out of here because now I need a bridge. I go to the bridge and it's back to 0. If I go straight from here into the menu, it keeps the grade, but it should do either way. And yeah, let's go over to the next one. Consistent way to choose direction when snapping to track. Especially if you want to do something like this over here, you have a bit of track, and then you put down your bumper, which for some reason doesn't come with any ground fill down below it. If I now want to add embankment, yeah, sometimes it works, but sometimes it just goes the wrong way, and it's really hard to make work and actually have it go where you want to. There used to be a trick to this a while ago, but it seems to be pretty random right now, and it's very frustrating. Separate deletion section for industries shouldn't be part of all. This is more of a nitpick, I admit, but I think it's overall also pretty important, because of the deletion tool, since there are subcategories like bankment, facilities, props, track, and all of that, very often you just want it to be set to all and not just be bothering with switching through all of that. But I think, first up, industries should just be their own thing, and they also shouldn't be part of all. So if you go to all, you still shouldn't be able to delete industries, because at the end of the day, this is how you can very easily and quickly mess up your entire playthrough by accidentally deleting the industry from existence. There is now, of course, and I think I forgot to mention that, the undo button. So that's nice, I can undo it right here. And that brings back the stuff where it was before. The thing is, if I leave the tool, and let's say I go in here, delete a few things, now press 7 to undo, I can also redo. But if I now leave the tool and go back in, I cannot bring back the other two crossover parts because it deleted its memory. And yeah, just as a security measure, industry should not be part of all and be their own separate point, and that should be it. Potentially the same for rolling stuff, because yeah, if you buy an expensive engine, accidentally delete it, then panic and close the menu point, you are going to need to just reload the last save, otherwise you kind of screwed yourself over in a major way. And in my opinion, putting down the industries most of the time, that's happening before you really start your playthrough, and therefore you're kind of in a different mode there anyways. Okay, enough about that. Last thing here is save the world options. That means if you load back into a save that you adjusted your physics settings, your industry difficulty, the automatic couplers, and your fuel consumption, right now none of that is getting saved, and that all should be defaulting back to what you had last session. It's not a bad idea to have the option to change it every time you go in there, but by default it should go back to the last section and not like beginner physics, easy industry difficulty, no fuel consumption, and automatic couplers. That's just BS and shouldn't be the starting thing. The same with your weather options here. Every time I go back in here, dynamic weather is off by default. It just goes to custom weather. I mean, I might as well keep it for this because it's better for videos. But in the end, it should keep the thing that it was last session, plain and simple. Now to the presentation, and don't worry, this is all just the same points, but in the order of which I remembered them, or came up with them. So we won't be going through those. Presentation is more the optical stuff, but it also is what brings the game together or makes it fall apart if things don't fit. And a lot of this game right now doesn't really fit, and we are going to start by the scale of the buildings compared to our character. So if I just fly over to the cattle farm, we are going... I hate the fly mode. We are going to see this pretty quickly if I go into third person, because you may not see it from this distance, but something is seriously wrong with this building. You may notice it now the closer we get, because the closer we get, the smaller Mr. Railroadson seems to be, and trust me, he is a big boy. May not feel like it as soon as he arrives at the door, because this seems to be made for giants. And a lot of the buildings in this game have the same problem. A lot of the ones in the prop section, and it's just... this should be addressed. Ideally before anything got added to begin with, but since they didn't do that, at least they could do it now. I don't think it will happen, but really it should, because this is hilariously bad. Next one, add proper unloading animations or do something. I don't know what the best thing would be, because this could be a lot of work, but right now what we have in game, it just looks awful. And what I really mean is this whole, if you want to unload, the item is going to disappear from your car, reappear somewhere mid-air, and then fall down to the ground. It looks the worst with cattle. I don't want to imagine how it would look like if you had this with passenger cars. I mean, I can also see a world where we load passenger cars using cranes, with how that has been working out in the past. But yeah, this should be addressed. I know that Century of Steam does it right now, at least in its beta version, by just having the item fade out of existence, and I think that at least doesn't look that janky. Ideally, I would like to see proper unloading animations, but even if not, there are more elegant ways to do this and at least be more presentable. I like it a bit more on this end, where we have the ramp for the lumber, or I mean for the logs. Would be nicer if we could maybe actually take out the side things here and have them all dynamically roll off the car. That would really be the highest quality option. And then only once they hit the water, or in this case ground, then some way to transition into storage. But yeah, this is at least having somewhat of an attempt, and having more like this, I think, would already look much better. We have different hoppers and all of that, and I don't get why we don't get to unload them through the bottom. Would make quite a lot of sense with the coal tower as well, because that one has a great ATV back, like this one right here. There are a lot of things they could be doing, and what we have here right now is really just the most garbage looking option out of all of them, I fear. And yeah, I don't necessarily expect any change to that until the game comes out, and even after. But yeah, I think this is just one of those things that is never going to look... it just doesn't look right for me. What also doesn't look right is the floating text at industries and facilities, and that should be replaced as well. Stuff like this over here. Or at different industries, or the capacities, or the names and all of that. Put that on signs. Iron ore mine could be a sign on the building. There could be a sign over here, maybe one with some wheels on it, where you can basically, if you turn the wheel, you scroll through the numbers or something for the actual capacity and all of that. Maybe a chalkboard, or have some of those flip over things like you can see for some calendars and that kind of stuff. That's all rustic and old looking. That could be different options. There's a lot of things you can do here, but this all really doesn't fit with 1900s vibe or something. Early 20th century. And really, it looks even worse at night, because those things glow in the dark. They removed that for like one update or so, and I was pretty happy about it, because, well, Barely anything around here is illuminated apart from some of the coaches. As I mentioned before, they actually have lights that turn on in the dark. But yeah, just going past some of the industries and seeing all the floating text over here, and it's the only one that's light up and bright, and I mean, we can make this even worse if we change the weather to be darker, because at this point, yeah, that's basically going to be the only stuff you're going to see. But enough about that, let's turn it back to day again. This should all be addressed. Next one, replace the low resolution textures. So I brought up the examples of the passenger coach. I mean, the seats look nice. The wallpaper looks like it melted at some point. There's some model issues as well with the luggage rack here going partially into the little toilet area. And even inside the car, the things don't really fit together with the texture. The sawmill is just a completely awful looking building overall. I mean, just look at all the textures, it's just... nah. Not great. And things don't get better if you look at some other specific buildings. I mean, the roundhouse overall is nice looking. The rails pretty much are not. Same with the new turntable, and I don't see why it's so difficult for them to get a consistent rail model. Because these things are definitely not the same, and I don't see why they shouldn't be. Also, the doors are automatically opening on the roundhouse. It's almost impossible to get them closed. They will just automatically reopen, and that's a whole another issue, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, that should be taken care of. There are so many other instances and examples here all across the board. I think the other one I want to make is for the Eureka real quick. Where is it? Right there. Because that thing, some of the wood textures, I mean, they are a bit finer, that works out, but the rougher one, of which most of the cabin consists here, that looks like pixel art. Straight up. Some of them are a bit nicer, like the planks on top right here, but everything else, it's... nah. This really isn't it. Weirdly enough, some of the brass textures and the pipes over here, they actually look a bit nicer than in a lot of other engines. And thus the inconsistency of those textures is a whole nother topic, and that should all be sorted out. And last but not least, proper LODs. I want to keep this short because this video is almost an hour long already. Just keep an eye on the stock out there at the sawmill. If I go back a bit further, come back in, it disappears, reappears, and it's all kinda garbagey. And this should all be taken care of, so that's not that obvious. I mean, you can basically see the entire thing disappear right now. I know that with these things, it's always an optimization thing, and there will always be some things about it. You cannot really make it perfect. There will always be a distance border at which you get the higher level texture, and if you go further away, it's gonna snap over to the lower level, unless you use nanite, which they could, but yeah, that's brand new technology still, or somewhat new. So it's not gonna be perfect, but it can definitely be better than this. Especially if you look at the deck missing over there. They should just go back and redo some of it. I think it would be better if it just had completely filled in deck instead of having none at all, because this is just... it's kinda garbage. Needs to be addressed. It's okay for an early access game, but the second they announced that they want to leave early access, they really put themselves up for quite a bit of criticism. It's okay if they address it, but with how things have gone in the past, and especially with just how long it has been since the last update, things are really not going well. But yeah, that's just my list. I think there could still be a few other points that you could put on there. Some things could maybe be argued that they are not that big of a deal as some other things, but I think overall I can stand behind this list. Let me know what you think about it. And with that, I'll finally end this one. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed or at least found it useful. And let me know your thoughts and opinions on the matter. Till then, till next time, have a good one and bye bye.